Welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is the founder of the UK Travel Planning website, Tracy Collins. In this podcast, Tracy shares destination guides, travel tips, and itinerary ideas, as well as interviews with a variety of guests who share their knowledge and experience of UK travel to help you plan your perfect UK vacation. Join us as we explore the UK from cosmopolitan cities to quaint villages, from historic castles to beautiful islands, and from the picturesque countryside to seaside towns.
Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the UK Travel Planner podcast. In this podcast, I chat with Doug of Meneage Tours in Cornwall. If you listened to episode 32 of the podcast when we chatted to Wendy Hume about her month-long driving holiday around the UK, you may remember how much Wendy loved her day tour with Meneage Tours. So I had to ask Doug onto the podcast to chat about all things Cornish. In this episode, Doug shares information about the various tours he offers around Cornwall, including tours for fans of Doc Martin and Poldark. He shares tips and insider information perfect if you're planning a trip to Cornwall, including the advantages of taking a private driver guided tour with Meneage Tours, and also Doug's number one tip for first-time visitors to Cornwall. So without further ado, let's chat to Doug.
Yeah, my name's Doug, and I'm also married to a Tracy as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty unusual. But I've predominantly been, for the last 15 years, I've had my own taxi company. And about 4 or 5 years ago, when Poldark was still filming down here, I was invited to provide a vehicle for one of the actors who lived in Cornwall, needed to get to the set. And because the set was, or some of the positions of where it was being filmed were off-road, they asked me to take him down, but also take him from the set, or from the trailers down to the set. And so they sort of did this for a few days. And, I noticed that actually a lot of people, watching and looking around. And I sort of kind of thought, well, maybe if I did some tours or something along that lines, and that's how Meneage Tours was born. So that's how it really started, really. And so I sort of, ummed and ahed for a little bit, then took the plunge.
Yeah.
And, immediately found that I wasn't actually the only one doing tours. There were quite a few other companies. So all I did was I emailed them and said, well, look, if you get any extra work, would you consider me? And one of them did, and actually gave me a lot of work for that year. And, it went really well. And, of course, then I started getting a lot of bookings for the next year on my own. And, of course, then COVID hit. So that sort of knocked everything back into a cocked hat. And there was sadly then, with COVID, I had to sort of look at options. And so, unfortunately, one of the things was that the nice 4x4 had to go.
Yeah.
So, I'm hoping to sort of get back and get another vehicle of that ilk eventually, but at the moment we've got sort of more, practical vehicles in the shape of a sort of a people carrier and a larger people carrier.
Okay,
rather than the sort of complete luxury.
But that's, I guess, in terms of when you take your tours and people book, what's the minimum number of people that you take on a tour and kind of the maximum? I guess that would be interesting as well to know.
Yeah, so a minimum number is one person, but I can cater for up to 8 people. But I wouldn't perhaps recommend doing a really long tour with 8 people. It can get a little cramped. Just actually I should have said that the Meneage Tours, sort of the name Meneage, actually, I get lots of pronunciations of Meneage and Meneage and Menage, and I should, if I had £1 for every time that I got a mispronunciation, wouldn't need to work. But
I've realised, Doug, that I've been pronouncing it the whole time because I've been saying Meneage. So I've been getting it wrong as well.
Oh, no, that's okay. But funnily enough, it's a Cornish term, and it's quite a local term for the Lizard Peninsula.
Right.
And it actually means monkish land or land belonging to the church. Okay. And it's actually a higher grade than glebe. So glebe is another ecclesiastical term that means vicar's land, but Meneage is actually bishop's land.
Right.
And it's probably thought to be where perhaps also monasteries appeared several hundred years ago on the Lizard Peninsula, because that was a route favoured by people going down to the Holy Land and Spain on walks, because it was actually considered too dangerous to sail around Land's End because of the pirates and everything like that.
Right, yes.
But it was only then, latterly, then people started going a bit further north and coming into, and then walking across Bodmin Moor, and then picking up another boat from Foy going across to Brittany. Right. And you actually see that if you did a tour with me on sort of Doc Martin tour, we go onto Bodmin Moor, and there's a place there called Temple, and there's it's a church now, but it's actually called Temple because of the Knights Templar, which was a resting point. So, and you can actually see a stained glass window to that effect of a Knights Templar in the stained glass.
Oh, I see. I wish I'd known you last year, because we actually stayed on Bodmin Moor. I didn't know about that, and my dog would have absolutely loved that. So you see that, and that was I guess one of the questions, and I answer this in the group myself quite a lot, and on the Facebook group and on the website, is there's so many advantages to going out on a private tour with you guys, and one of those things is what you've just said, that local knowledge that you have, which is invaluable. So, and you can do a lot of research, and obviously we write a lot about the area and stuff, but we know that if people want that kind of in-depth experience of going around Cornwall, a great way to do it is to go with you guys.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're going to get, little anecdotes like that. You could perhaps research it on your own. You could go and drive there. Fair enough. You could find it, but you're perhaps not going to know exactly where it is or the history, or whereas we can just take you straight there. And
exactly. Well, that's it. You can kind of do more in a day, in terms of, rather than kind of us trying to find that sort of place, that you can plan it out as well. Because I know that you can do tours that are kind of bespoke for people. But I wondered if it would be worth actually talking about some of the tours that you do, your most popular tours, because I know you've got quite a few. I was going to talk to you a little bit about the ancestry one, because that fascinates me. But I think if we talk about maybe your most popular tours, and I know a lot of them, they're going to be based around some of those famous TV shows.
Yeah, I mean, probably the two most famous ones, or the two most popular tours that I do, are the Poldark and the West Cornwall tour, because that's a lovely day trip, and we take you to a few Poldark locations where it was filmed, and it's not just Poldark. So I mean, even if you haven't watched the show or anything like that, we're still going to take you to lots of places that, great Cornish vistas, and places like St Michael's Mount, and that sort of, there's some really lovely places to see that even if you haven't seen Poldark, you'll just be amazed at the scenery and everything like that. So.
I mean, it's such a stunning, beautiful part of the world. The advantage as well, I mean, you guys, we did a bit of a road trip around Cornwall last year, and obviously we did struggle, it was July, we struggled like a lot of people do when they're driving. We couldn't get parked in some places. So places like Mousehole, we had to just drive straight through because there was nowhere to park. But obviously, if we go with you guys, you know where to go, you know where to park, where you can always drop your guests off so they can have a walk.
That's it. I mean, a lot of, some of the places, parking is a premium. I mean, the Doc Martin tour, particularly if you're taking people to Port Isaac, it's an absolute nightmare, narrow streets and everything like that. And you can't park anywhere near the car park is about a mile out of town. So, I mean, the advantage of having a tour is that we can drop you right in the centre, and you can wander around. It takes about 45 minutes. It's all self-explanatory. There's a guide that you can walk around, and it tells you all the locations of where the places are filmed, which is really, really good. And, we can pick you up again 45 minutes, an hour later, and you've been able to see it and then not have to struggle either down the hill or even back up the hill again,
Yes, so we did park and walk down and then walked back up again. So, and you don't want to be doing that on a hot summer's day, I tell you.
Exactly. That's right.
Absolutely. And St Ives, perfect example for St Ives, because we drove to St Ives and we gave up trying to get parked. So we actually ended up going the next day and going to St Earth and getting the train in. That was what we did.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to do St Earth and by car, park in St Earth and get the train in. It's by far the simplest way, and actually the best way, because that was one of the most scenic train lines in Britain.
It is absolutely beautiful train line, that one, and it's not very long, but then it gets you straight into St Ives, which is amazing. So
yeah,
it's fun.
That's right.
But I think a lot of people obviously are scared about driving in Cornwall, because I didn't drive in Cornwall. I asked my husband to do it because I was not driving on some of those. I took my daughter when she was 5, actually, and I did all the driving on that trip, which is another reason I didn't drive last year, because obviously high hedges, you can't necessarily see what's coming around the corner. You've got single roads, you've got steep. So again, you guys do the driving, and I was thinking, if you go into some of these beautiful places, one person, if they're driving, is missing out. They're not getting to see all that beautiful scenery because they're concentrating on the roads.
Yeah, well, you probably two are missing out because you've then got one driving and one map reading.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah,
and then you have an argument when you miss the turning, and
absolutely, and yeah, you're right. And somebody's navigating and watching, and the other person's driving. And there's probably a few words I had with Doug a couple of times about, and also the amount of on Bodmin with the horses on the road, the sheep on the roads in the morning. When we were going backwards and forwards, the wild horses, the wild ponies were there. So you've got to be mindful of all of that. So that's a huge advantage. So when people inquire to book with you guys, I guess Poldark and Doc Martin are going to be the two kind of TV programmy things that people are wanting to kind of see. And obviously other associations with Cornwall are going to be people like Rosamund Pilcher who was from St. Ives, and the Shell Seekers, which I read in the 80s, I think late 80s. I've not read it.
Yeah, that's right. That was the Joanna Lumley, where she starred in that. And she was born in the land and raised there. And you can actually see her house still there, not lovely house overlooking the estuary.
Yeah.
And of course, then she moved away to Scotland when she was about 20, married an army officer. And she sort of, was dreadfully homesick. I think, she was quite young and, married young. And then she was on her own pretty much. And she started writing these novels about growing up in Cornwall. I mean, they are fairly similar, a lot of them. But she did very well at it. She made a lot of money. And
they're still popular. They're still popular because they're actually, the Shell Seekers has come up. So we were talking about just different books and books that we're reading at the moment. I did a Facebook Live a couple of weeks ago, and we're talking about what we're reading, and the Shell Seekers came up from a few people in the group. So it's still something that people are, enjoying.
Yeah, I mean, do you know that they've actually been adapted for German television?
Yeah, I've heard they're very popular in Germany.
Yeah, really popular. It's a massive following. And you get, a lot of German, Austrian, and Swiss tourists that come over each year to come and see Cornwall. It's actually very difficult, though, to actually try and pinpoint some of the locations, because they do tend to flit around Cornwall. So you have one scene, it's sort of down in West Cornwall, and then 2 seconds later they're flying over Padstow on an aerial shot, and then they're back to the south coast. So it's like incredibly difficult to actually try and pinpoint scenes and stuff like that. But there are a few sort of notable ones that I've got that we can take people to if they're into that.
Yeah. So obviously you've got some kind of tours that you've recommended. You've got your Poldark, you've got your Doc Martin. So Poldark is kind of your West Cornwall Poldark, and then Doc Martin kind of north.
Doc Martin is the sort of north coast. I do another one which is a tour which takes you out onto the Lizard Peninsula. So that's really a nice, sort of countryside, but they'll soon take you down to the most southerly part of Great Britain, as opposed to Land's End, which is the most southwesterly part. So, and of course, then you can go, if you're going to Lizard Peninsula, you can go down to Kynance Cove, because Kynance and Michael's Mount have just featured in the latest Game of Thrones, the Day of the Dragon. So that's featured quite heavily, those two places.
So I guess
we can take you to both.
A kind of like a connection with that now. So it's going to be the Lizard Peninsula with the kind of Day of the Dragon.
The Lizard's going to start getting a lot of hits there now, and I'm a slightly biased because I live on the Lizard, so it's a beautiful area, and it doesn't get enough attention all the time. Yeah.
No, I guess it probably doesn't. And actually, even when I was thinking about our itinerary last year, we didn't get a chance really to explore that area. So that's definitely, if I get a chance to come over, because I'll be over in the UK for 3 months this year, then that's the area I would like to see more. Again, trying to kind of raise the profile of some areas that people don't necessarily have first in there, because a lot of people know about St. Ives comes up more often than not. And obviously St. Michael's Mount's hugely popular. So it's nice to kind of also kind of highlight some of the areas that might not come, beyond people's radar. So if people want to come on your tours, how often, do people tend to come down to Cornwall by train and then you pick them up there, or do you go and pick people up from airports? How do you do?
Anything really. I mean, at the moment, because of the train strikes, obviously it's quite difficult sometimes people trying to plan things and not being able to. But it's really, I mean, a mixture, I suppose, of people that come down by train. We don't tend to get involved in the organisation so much as for their accommodation, although we can recommend places to stay. So it's generally we take people out on day trips, although, sometimes we're happy to go up to Heathrow or anywhere in London or anywhere in the country for that matter and go and pick people up. Mm-hmm. And then we can always tour people back down into Cornwall and then incorporate, a bit of touring on the way back down. But, unfortunately, Cornwall is long and thin, and, it's 75 miles long, 22 miles wide at its widest point, and then 5 miles wide at its narrowest point down near Penzance.
Yeah.
So I think when you sort of come to stay in Cornwall, you have to sort of bear in mind where you're staying to which tour you want, because there's no point having a tour in West Cornwall if you're staying sort of further north than Truro, because the travelling time is an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the roads, as much as it's lovely down here, we have no motorways. We have one dual carriageway going up through the spine of Cornwall, and that's it. And that just gets clogged up in the summer, So, I have a lot of people that come in by cruise ship into Falmouth, and they want to go, and do a sort of Doc Martin tour around Tintagel and Boscastle, and they're like, well, it's only 70 miles. Well, yeah, I know it's only 70 miles, but that's nearly a 2.5 hour trip each way on a sort of 7-8 hour tour. Well, that's 5 hours, and you haven't got a lot of time then to see a lot more.
And I think that's actually, that's a great point to make, Doug, really, because I think people don't assume, that it's as far as it is from London. I think that comes up quite often. But also when you get there, getting around is not quick, because you're talking about, small little lanes and roads, and, it's like you say, there's no motorways, and it gets busy. Brits love going to Cornwall. It's a popular holiday destination for Brits.
That's
as well
right.
as everything.
Yeah.
So, you just need a nice summer like we had last year. We were there in July, and we couldn't get parked in lots of places. We had to drive through, and it was very busy. And that was before the schools broke up. So I'd hate to think what it was like in August.
Yeah, it's sort of it's still a beautiful county, but you just don't want to rush it.
If somebody's thinking, I really want to go to Cornwall, I'm really interested in the Doc Martin stuff, or I'm really interested, I really want to go to St. Michael's Mount, I really want to do that, is to talk to you, is to get in touch with you and say, look, how would this work? How could you do this for me?
Exactly. The probably the easiest thing is to perhaps, go and stay in two places. We can also do it that you can have a touring day or part day, and then we just move and have transfer and move you down to another hotel.
Yeah,
then,
that sounds good.
Then you could have a day on your own, and then perhaps another day and tour, and then move on. It's like anything's sort of possible. You just have to sort of think slightly out of the box sometimes and do things a different way.
Yeah. But it's like that's the advantage of being able to speak to you and say this is what we're interested in, because you know the area, so what would work best.
Yeah.
And I know you do a 5-day tour as well.
We do, yeah. So that's sort of, doing the Poldark tour, Doc Martin, the Lizard, and then you can sort of, do for Roseland Peninsula tour and go on further, and then, an East Cornwall tour as well. So.
Yeah, so that's a pretty in-depth one where you get to see.
That's a pretty in-depth one, and, generally a lot of those ones people tend to perhaps tack on where they go back on up to Bath on the final day.
Yeah. And
maybe they're coming down from somewhere else on the first day. So it's sort of, you can sort of visit other places on the way down. I mean, as we normally tend to do, if we're picking up from Heathrow, we'll do a drive past Stonehenge so people can see that. And then perhaps go on to Avebury, which is another beautiful set of standing stones and stuff like that. And that's actually free. And you can get up close and touch the stones and everything. unlike Stonehenge, where you're kept at more than arm's length.
I love Avebury, I have to say. I really do love Avebury. And I enjoy going to Stonehenge, but I remember going to Stonehenge 30 years ago when you parked and you went through the tunnel.
Through the tunnel, yeah.
There was just me at the Stones today. It just seems like a different world now when you go, when it's so popular. But
I mean, the other place that we go to quite often is Starhead, which is near Warminster, which are some gardens there. Yep. And that was where the 2005 film Pride and Prejudice was filmed.
Right.
Where Mr. Darcy proposed to Elizabeth Bennet.
Yep.
There. And also, that's just recently featured in series 2 of Bridgerton.
Oh, okay. Well, that would make it popular as well.
So that's, quite a good little place to stop as well.
So I guess if somebody wanted, even if they wanted, there's like a couple of, 2 or 3 people wanting picking up from Heathrow and bring it back to take into accommodation in Cornwall, you can incorporate the places of interest along the way.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not just a black down the motorway and,
Yeah. So that's great. That's kind of like arriving and having a first day of touring on your first day that you arrive, but also in comfort because you're getting driven. Which is great.
Exactly.
It's a great way of dealing with that. You're not driving anywhere because you guys are doing it. So obviously, if people want to get in touch with you to book a tour with you, there's going to be links in the show notes for this episode, which I'll at the end of the podcast, I'll kind of put all that information on there. So obviously, if people want to do that, they can click through to the show notes. But also, if you want to just share, Doug, as well, how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, the easiest way is just go onto my website, meneagetours.com.
Yep.
And then there's a page on there where they can send a message and get in touch by email. So that's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, I think that's
or my email is meneagetours@yahoo.com.
And that's MENEAGE.
That's it. Yeah.
I could pronounce it incorrectly. So I know. I will remember it's Meneage now. So, Doug, obviously, it's been great having a chat with you and talking about some of the tours. I just want to mention one tour that really kind of struck with me, and I think this might be of interest as well to a lot of our kind of listeners worldwide, is the fact that you got the tours for anybody who's interested in their ancestry. Now, the reason I mention that is actually my great-grandfather was from Cornwall. He was a Cornish tin miner who left in the mid-1800s and met my great-grandmother in Derbyshire on the way up and then settled up in Northumberland on the coal mine.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm Cornish blood.
There we go. Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly if people want to do an ancestry tour, that's something they definitely need to get in touch with me beforehand.
Yeah.
Because, yes, we could sort of perhaps do it on the day, but if people want to actually can get in touch with me and then I can do a bit of background research and get hold of church wardens and stuff like that for churches. And normally quite a lot of these people, they're more than happy to look at the old records and stuff like that. I've did a few a couple of years ago where I did get it sort of sprung on me, or the husband was rather reluctant to mention it, so that the wife was sort of giving a few nudges.
Yeah.
And we just sort of found this church, and I said, well, let's go and have a look. And we actually found that the husband's descendants in the graveyard, wow. Just by chance, the church warden happened to be there at the time, and we found the records in the church as well. But that was real pure luck, and a lot of the records unfortunately aren't kept in the church anymore, because of sort of damp, I guess, and things like that. So yeah, if you want to do an ancestry tour, we're more than happy, but please get in touch first.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I will be because I'm fascinated. When I read that, I was like, oh my goodness, now I know who to talk to about my ancestry in Cornwall. Because everybody I guess it's a hot topic at the moment. People are interested in kind of tracing back the ancestry. And as you say, I couldn't believe it when I read that 25% of the Cornish population left Cornwall in that late 19th century. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's right. When the tin mines closed down, it was such a big employer, and and that's how the expertise spread around the world, and ultimately the religion spread around the world as well. With they took their religion with them and their churches.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a fascinating topic, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of people that are listening going, oh, hang on, I'm sure I've got Cornish ancestry. I need to get in touch with Doug. So that'd be brilliant. So just one last question, Doug, for today, and it's a question I always ask everybody who comes on the podcast.
Yeah.
And what what tip do you have for anyone planning to visit Cornwall for the first time?
First time, well, my biggest one would be don't expect to see Cornwall in a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I said earlier, it's 75 miles long. You're probably looking, just to have a sort of a touch of all places, you're probably looking at about minimum of 4 days. And it's a lovely part of the world, and every bit is different,
Yes.
But on the most part, we're all friendly. We don't bite,
No, and lovely Cornish pasties and lovely ice cream.
oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, and a few cream teas to boot as well.
Absolutely, with the jam on first and then the cream, of course, because we're in Cornwall.
Oh, well done. Okay.
Yeah.
Got that one right.
Cornish background, Doug, Cornish background.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, rubs off. Anyway, I have to say, Doug, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week. It's been brilliant to talk to you.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, and that's great.
Thanks again to Doug for coming onto the podcast to talk about the beautiful county of Cornwall and, of course, Meneage Tours. You'll find links to everything we chatted about in today's episode at uktravelplanning.com/episode 34. This includes a link to Meneage Tours' website and the various tours offered for those of you keen to book one of Doug's fabulous tours. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review and rating, just like listener All This in Heaven 2 from the United States, who said, full of actual helpful information. The passion and excitement for travel in the UK is evident through this informative and fun podcast. I have gleaned so much helpful information and I've learned so much more about the UK than I expected to. This podcast is a great blend of Tracy and Doug sharing their vast knowledge and having guests speak to speciality topics or areas of the country. Tracy also asks great questions to keep the content fresh and applicable. Thank you so much for your lovely review, All This in Heaven 2 from the US. We really appreciate that. For the chance of a mention in a future episode, please leave us a review too. We really love hearing from all of you. Anyway, that just leaves me to say for this week, happy UK travel planning.